What's up, horror fans? It's Danny from the Lasercast, joined as always by Pete. And we are about to drop some acid and hit the desert. We are going to be talking about a new found footage movie called The Outwaters. This movie just came out. It is streaming on Screenbox,
Yes.
and it was also out in limited theatrical release. It was only playing in the Alamo Drafthouse by me like for one weekend.
Okay.
And I couldn't make it to the theater. I finally sat down last night and watched this movie. And whoa, boy, this is an experience. What did you think about your trip to the Outwaters?
I'm kind of jealous because you had the potential to go see it in the theater, right? And I wonder if it was available here in Austin, Texas, because
Well,
I think
you
that
live
if you,
in the home of Alamo Drafthouse,
I know
so
what's my problem, man. Yeah, but this movie, I feel like if you saw it on the big screen in a theater with the lights off, it'd be a
I'm really, I'm really annoyed that I didn't go see this like it's one of those movies where I retroactively am pissed at myself
right.
for not seeing, because spoiler alert, I really freaking like this movie, and I feel like had I seen it in the theater, in a dark theater, especially in Alamo Drafthouse, where I would have been at least 2 to 3 beers in by this point, it would have really blown me away, even more than it did.
Yeah.
And I followed the directions last night on Twitter. The director and the people who run the Outwaters Twitter site, they tell you, shut off the lights, turn up the volume, and die in the dark. That's like the whole expression. Turn off the lights, turn up the volume, and die in the dark. And I did it. It is one of the first movies in a long time that I watched at home where I just put my phone down and did not pause the movie, did not check my phone. I committed to an hour and 50 minutes of this movie, and I'm very, very glad I did.
Yeah, it's definitely a movie to experience, and I wish that I had watched those instructions before I'd watched the movie, because it's not a movie where plot is the issue. You're not sitting there like you can't pause it like you said and come back because you really want to know what happens next. It's an experience, and honestly, I'm not really sure exactly what I saw, but to me, it's like it's a found footage movie, but it breaks the rules of what you expect with a found footage movie. It's found footage is the idea that like, oh, someone stumbled across this, and so even though you're seeing some crazy wild shit, it's still within our world, and the way that it's filmed in such a way it makes sense as if someone caught this with a camera versus it's a like kind of abstract avant-garde kind of movie. And this movie just totally goes out there to the next level by the
Yeah.
third act. Yeah.
I actually thought about our discussion that we had oh my god, about uh what was the Lake Mungo.
Yeah, okay.
And we had a conversation about Lake Mungo, which you can watch on this channel, and we talked about the phrase found footage and how that term has been used to describe basically anything that is handheld, whether it's docu-style, which is what Lake Mungo is.
Yes.
This movie felt a lot more like the Blair Witch Project in the sense that it does start with a disclaimer that says, it starts with a 911 call and screaming. And then you basically are given 4 still photos of the 4 main cast members, and you're told their names and when they disappeared. And then you're told that about 4 to 5 years later, this footage was found in the Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
So it does kind of, this movie, especially more than like a Lake Mungo, or even a Paranormal Activity, which again wasn't really found footage. It was more like, hey, look at my camera. We're going to record everything. And then, this actually does feel like that old school found footage. I described this on Twitter last night after I watched it as Blair Witch Project meets 2001: A Space Odyssey and Lovecraft all on acid.
Oh my God. Yeah, yeah. That's a good way of putting it. I really like that 2001 reference there. I feel like this movie is the last 20 seconds of the Blair Witch Project on acid, or at least like half of it. You know, when we did our first part of the best of video, there was multiple times where you said that a couple of the movies have one feeling for the beginning of the movie and then a dramatically different feeling for the second half of the movie. And this movie really lingers and takes its time with the main characters at first, to the point where I'm not gonna say it's boring, but like I'm kind of like, all right, what's going on here? What am I supposed to be seeing? And go ahead.
I think that I agree with you in a sense where for the first 45 to 50 minutes, you're sitting there and you're going, okay,
right.
I understand where we're heading, why we're heading to where we're heading. Are we going to get there? And you know, when is this? You know, I've heard so much shit about this movie.
Yeah.
When is that crazy stuff going to happen?
Right.
But when the crazy stuff starts happening, I kind of again retroactively was like, okay, I take back my apprehension, because I did feel like it needed that build up. You needed to understand who Robbie was. And Robbie, by the way, is the writer-director Robbie Banfitch. He actually plays Robbie in the movie.
Right.
So massive credit to him for doing what he did. I read on IMDb that his two movies that he was trying to that he had in mind as he was making this movie were Blair Witch Project and Terrence Malick's Tree of Life.
Oh.
Now, have you seen Tree of Life?
I have not. The only movie of his I've seen is Thin Red Line, and that was something else, I thought.
Yeah. Terrence Malick is a director who dabbles in and out of narrative storytelling. He'll set his story in a narrative regular world, but then he'll include tons of really avant-garde type of almost experimental filming and film styles. Tree of Life is out there. Brad Pitt's in it. Yeah. It's one of those movies where when you watch it and the movie's over, you're at the same time you're like, no real clue what I just watched. I think I'm glad I just watched this, but I'm also not sure.
Yeah.
So, but if you've seen Tree of Life, and especially if you've seen the Blair Witch Project, this movie does kind of feel like those two movies combined, but then with just an absolute bonkers gore factor thrown in.
Right. Right.
You know, call it Cronenbergian, or, you know, there's stuff in there towards the end. I mean, that reminded me a little bit of Videodrome. And then there's one scene in particular that we could talk about after a spoiler warning where I just was not expecting. It's also it's the type of movie, and maybe I'm alone in this, where the movie ended and I had a lot of questions, but I also restarted the movie and I fast forwarded to different parts to see. I was like, oh wait, is this what I thought it was? Oh yeah. Shit, okay. And then I fast forwarded a little bit more and I went, oh, okay. Oh, that makes, now I think I understand it a little bit more. So it's the type of movie where, strangely, I feel like it is going to get better the more it's watched. Where it's going to be a movie where, you know, people get on their YouTube channels, their podcasts to talk about it and spend a lot of time going, I don't know what the fuck is going on. This is just a crazy freaking movie. Right. But given some examination and some rewatch, I think that it's going to become more evident as to kind of what's going on. I still have a ton of questions. I mean, I'd love to talk to Robbie Banfitch and ask him what drugs he's on and just, you know, what was going through his mind when he's thinking up some of these scenes in that second half of the movie, especially that final third, where it just gets, whew,
Yeah. I think that we're seeing the effects of COVID. I say this a lot in a lot of our videos, but I think we're seeing this weird effect of COVID where maybe people are just exposed to movies they wouldn't have watched or pursued when they were in shelter in place. And then when they're making a movie, they have to make it these isolated movies, and then they just get really super, super creative with them, right? And I think about this movie and I think, okay, well, what things could I reference when I'm talking about it? Like, I think 2001, especially the end of 2001, is a great example for this movie, right? And then, like, referencing Terrence Malick stuff, that makes a lot of sense. I usually reference David Lynch. I don't think that fits this, but that's sort of that feeling of like you're disturbed by what you're watching. You're not really sure what you're watching. That's something I could compare to David Lynch. And I feel like he's just starting to influence filmmakers. I don't think he's necessarily an influence on this, but that's sort of that weird filmmaking where you don't know what the fuck is going on is evident here, right? And then I'm not as familiar with like 70s Cronenberg stuff. The weird thing is I kind of just know his like sort of Viggo Mortensen kind of later career stuff pretty well. I don't know his early stuff, but I know that he has that weird out there vision too. His son, I know just based on what you were telling me about, Infinity Pool, and then after seeing Possessor, I know his son can make some really weird shit too. So I think that like we're
this
seeing
would be a hell of a double feature with fucking Infinity Pool. Holy shit. You need to take the next 2 days off from work after doing that double feature.
Right. So I think we're sort of seeing this new batch of kind of small scale in terms of what actually happens, right? Because this is only just 4 people getting lost in the desert, essentially, right? And then like murders, but like
not even really getting lost in the desert. It's just they're in the desert. Weird shit happens. Like I think that's basically like even like the description on Screambox is basically just like 4 friends are in the Mojave Desert and they experience a phenomenon that like, and there's parts of the movie, especially again that first 45 minutes, like I would say from about the 40-minute mark to about the 50-minute mark, where things get really weird and creepy.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, I try to always like I really know that I'm loving a movie or I'm really enjoying a movie if I start to like put myself into the position of these characters. And the idea of camping in the middle of nowhere in the Mojave Desert and then hearing those noises in the middle of the night.
Nope.
And like, just like, I'll tell you like moments that made me like so freaking tense. Again, I'm sitting in the freaking dark. I'm laying down on my bed. It's pitch black in here. I got my cats on top of me.
Right.
And I'm just like, don't open those zippers. Don't open the zippers to the tent. Like, it's because it's pitch black outside. And like one of the characters says something about, oh, well, you know why it's so loud? It's because there's nothing else around here to dull down the sound. And then I started to think, shit, I live in New York City. Could you imagine if you took all the like noise of cars and constantly running 24-hour stores, if you took that shit out and you like how noisy it would be on like a night like the other night here in New York where we had a torrential storm, like high winds, and I live on the 6th floor, and like I said to Athena, like it felt like I couldn't make it from the living room to the bedroom because the wind was blowing in our apartment.
Wow.
And I started to think about shit like that as I'm watching this movie. Like, don't even open the zipper to the tent. It's going to be darker out of the tent than it is in the tent. Like, just stay in the fucking tent.
Well, it's funny because you're saying that you had like this empathy for the characters. You could put yourself in their shoes, but don't you kind of feel like the characters are sort of like underdeveloped or not really that interesting? Like we have Robbie, who's a filmmaker, and then really there's a big focus on Michelle, the musician, right? And I read this one review that I'm trying to just pull up the site real quick. Austin Goslin wrote this review where they were saying that the way that things are filmed it's more like you're seeing things from Robbie's perspective versus finding found footage in the camera. And so, like, we get a lot of shots of like him really focused on Michelle, this singer. And you really don't know a lot about these characters. Just it's really based on their reactions to things, right? With Michelle, I feel like you learn a little bit about her because she keeps mentioning her mom like over and
Mhm.
over again, right? And in the beginning, Robbie and his brother, they mention his dad a couple of times too, right? There seems to be these like references to like parents and like who came before. We know Michelle's
Yes.
mother's dead too, and I think she was a singer as well beforehand.
And yeah, she makes reference to the songs that she's singing. Like for like the whole plot of the movie is that they're going out into the desert to basically film her music video.
Right.
And yeah, so she's singing these songs throughout the movie. And I got into that. Like I really did get into that. And she has a good voice, and I got into that one scene especially where they're kind of standing in a circle and they're banging the rocks together to like make percussion. I
Yes.
got into that, and there was a lot of stuff where like I'm from New York City, obviously. I was in Hollywood last year, and my favorite part about being in Hollywood, and this is as a tremendous movie fan, was actually hiking through Runyon Canyon. And I freaking loved it. And I wish I could do more hiking. I'm like so stoked. I'm going to Arizona for spring break, and
Nice.
like I'm gonna do a shit ton of running and hiking out there. And we're gonna try to make it to the Grand Canyon. We'll see what happens. And it's like I just really enjoyed, again, like to what you said before about how like that first 40 minutes is like these characters don't exactly feel developed, but I kind of was enjoying the ride. It was such a beautiful landscape that was on display. I was enjoying like the beauty of like where they were. There's that one scene where they're swimming in this lake, and then just like the dry lake bed of the desert.
Yeah.
I was just in like, this is the Mojave. It's Southern California. It's Nevada. I live in friggin' Brooklyn. Like I don't get this. So I was really enjoying that aspect of it. And as far as the characters go, I feel like if there's a genre that is, if there's a subgenre of horror where it's okay to underdevelop your characters, it is found footage.
Yeah.
And so I felt like, okay, I understand why these characters are where they are. You have Michelle, her mom died. She's obviously singing tributes to her mother. And Robbie is this aspiring filmmaker who's going to film her music video. Angela is there to be like the makeup assistant. I was confused as the relationship to the characters because
Right.
Angela at one point mentions she's happy to be a married woman. I had no idea which one of the two brothers she was married to.
Right. Right. Right.
And like she was like very close. Like I was like, is that Robbie? Is she with Robbie? But then later on, it made it seem like Robbie was with Michelle. I will admit I was a little confused by in that first 40 minutes.
Right. 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 Right.
I like Angela says that she's from the Jersey Shore, and she's not used to this scenery as well. So I did kind of like any things that I was like curious about or weird or confused by as far as the character motivations. Those issues kind of fell to the wayside once
Yeah.
we get to the crazy shit.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, one thing that I say almost every fucking video is how much I hate exposition dumps and things being explained, right? And this is the antithesis of that. There's no explanation for anything, right? It's all speculation as to what's actually happening. And no one sits and holds your hand and says, this is this person and this is their relation to this person. It's very sparse. There's barely any dialogue in the movie. You know, you just have to kind of piece things together. And so I thought that one thing that we could do just for the next couple of minutes is talk about sort of standout scenes, like standout moments in this movie, because
So
they're
then
really,
let's throw up a spoiler warning now, because we've said
yeah,
crazy shit happens,
yeah,
but we haven't really mentioned any of the crazy shit. We've talked about the
right,
characters and kind of the setup to what gets them into the desert. So now officially 19, almost 20 minutes in, we can officially say we're going to start spoiling the Outwaters. Go on Screenbox TV, watch this movie. By the way, speaking of exposition, did you, there is, Screenbox is apparently releasing Card Zero. So you know how they found the found footage? There was multiple like cards from the cameras, memory cards, and it's like card 1, card 2, card 3. Apparently, there's a Card Zero coming out, which is kind of a prequel to kind of set up what's going on.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I'm just like curious as to like, is it just going to be like these 4 people like before they go to the desert? Because I don't know if I'd be totally into that, but if they're going to incorporate it into the movie, then maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh, that's intriguing. Okay, I didn't even know that existed. So that's kind of cool. I think like one thing that really needs to be mentioned as we go into these specific scenes is that the sound design for this movie, the way they use sound in this movie is pretty profound, actually. Like you mentioned the opening credits where they're showing the 9/11, not the 9/11, 911 call. And I was thinking that if I had seen that in the theater, I would have been very scared in that moment, just hearing the voices and that weird effect they had on the voices and that sort of that cacophony. There's quite a few scenes in this movie where sound just kind of builds on top of sound, and there's like, it sounds like voices or screaming, and it's overwhelming. And I think that when you combine that with like being in the darkness, like you were when you watch this movie or being in the theater, I think that could be very upsetting.
One other thing about the way I watched it, for some reason, on both my living room and bedroom TV, we keep the closed captioning on.
Yeah.
For some reason, like even on English movies.
Sure.
And so the closed captioning on this movie, like I want to say it helped, but it might have also hindered the experience, because I felt like I was kind of getting a cheat sheet into what was going on. And I wasn't even really hearing things. Like it was like sounds off in the distance, and I was being told by closed captioning what was happening.
Right.
And the closed captioning for a lot of the sounds are like weird. Like you're in the middle of the friggin' desert here. There's no water past one particular scene. And they actually, the closed captioning said orca noises, orca sounds.
Oh my God.
So like you're starting, like there's whale noises out in the desert. There's all sorts of, wild animals, and like there's characters that are kind of talking way off camera that you're not really sure you're hearing, that I was able to like read the dialogue for. Right. So I felt like, again, watching it at home, it helped me get a better sense of what was going on. Yeah. But it also, like, if I was in the movie theater, I would not have had that. Right. But it also would have been much louder on a much bigger screen. So I guess it's like the pros and cons of watching a movie in the theater versus watching it at home.
Yeah. And, with closed captioning, when you watch like just a TV show in general, like if you're watching a comedy, sometimes you'll get the punchline of the joke before the person says it. In horror movies, sometimes they'll give you like a sound and you don't really know what it is, but then it tells you what the sound is. You're like, oh, that's scary. It's like the alien is making this noise. Like, oh, that's the alien? Okay. But and one other thing to point out with this movie in particular is that sometimes the absence of sound is very scary too. There's this one scene that's not really a scary scene. It's not in the darkness. It's not like wondering what's over there, but it's Michelle they're filming a music video and she's singing by herself, but the volume has gone out. And I think there was an overlapping noise, like something over it. Like if you were recording something and there was something wrong with the recording. But just seeing her kind of move around and singing, but you don't hear her voice, it's very unsettling. And, and that's before essentially the shit hits the fans. So you have that. Then you have this one sequence where they go up to this rock and there's a hole in the rock and they stick a microphone into that hole. And that sound in itself is jarring. And that's when you're starting to get like built up to, something weird's going to happen.
And then of course you have the night scene where they're laying in the tents and there's just this series of loud explosions, and you have no clue what is happening. Like, are there bombs going up? Are there, it's this bizarre series of loud explosions and noises.
Yeah.
And they all get out of the tent, and then they start to see weird things in the darkness. Like, they find an axe just laying around. Robbie like focuses on the mountains, and then out in the far distance, blurry, there seems to be this character in red, and you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, should they go see what's going on?
Right.
All right. So there's a variety of moments in the first hour that are really building some like bizarrely weird tension.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Robbie, everybody starts screaming. And it's just about
Chaos.
Almost an hour of just absolute insanity.
Yes. And that's a good example of the captions kind of messing it up, because you don't really know what the hell's happening. You know that like Robbie is like maybe in a scuffle with that guy with the axe, but then there's like a dripping noise and the captions say Robbie's blood dripping or something like that. You're like, oh, okay, so he got hit in the head or something with the axe. So I thought that the image of the guy standing on the cliff holding the axe, that was a really disturbing kind of image, and that's going to probably haunt me for a little while. But that's sort of the tipping point from like there on. What he interacts with Robbie, and then the women just run away screaming like a couple of minutes later. The brother's like in the tent asleep at one point, but then I don't even remember what happens with the brother immediately after that. Do you remember?
He comes back to the tent. Robbie comes back to the tent later on, and the brother's just chilling, and everyone is covered in blood. Like out of nowhere, just everybody's covered with blood and like viscera and goopy guts.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and then you're in that position where you as the audience, you're waiting for the sun to come up so that you can see what the fuck is happening.
Right.
And then the sun comes up and Robbie's just there alone. He's covered in blood. He's dripped like blood everywhere. He's like, it looks like at points he's pulling his own skin off.
Right. It's like he's going through some kind of metamorphosis. He has like this extra layer of skin and he kind of peels it off his foot. That's really disturbing in itself. It's kind of funny because, when you watch a movie, they show the production companies in the very beginning, and one of them was Bloody Disgusting. That's a website, right? Just like Dread Central or like Beats of Doom, right? So when you watch the trailer, it kind of seems more like a thing like the thing that we just watched with the, Flanagan loved it so much. The
Lake Mungo.
Thank you so much, Lake Mungo. That's what the trailer makes it seem like, but then they show you like all these people covered in blood at the very end of the trailer. But then as you watch this movie, it's like, no, there's some like really disturbing, hardcore shit in this movie.
Oh yeah, I again, like we're almost 30 minutes in. Like we can describe in disgustingly vivid detail some of the things that happen in the final acts of this movie.
Whoa, he like froze. Now I kind of feel like I'm in this movie. All right, well, you guys probably can't hear what Danny is saying because it's completely frozen on his like face as he's talking. But he was going to say something about the final act of the movie and all these disturbing scenes. One question I was going to ask Danny, and hopefully he's going to come back in a second, is, and I'll ask this to you guys, the audience. Do you think that the filmmaker, that Robbie Banfitch, do you think that he is aware of like what actually happened to these four characters? Like, is it that it was something to do with aliens? Is it something to do with time travel? Oh, there he is. Okay, Danny, there you are. Wow, this is pretty ironic that this is happening.
Whatever noise you just made sounded like the fucking Outwaters, let me tell you.
No joke, Danny. I was just talking to our audience, and I was saying how like it's so fitting that you just like chirped out right there and then froze, and then you made this weird scratching noise. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
okay. Because when I was trying to fight my way back in, it said I heard oh shit. No, I'm still here. I heard on your end, I heard like damn. I was like, Jesus Christ. A message came up on my phone that said you should move closer to the router. No joke, I am 1.5 feet away from the router. So
yeah,
I don't know.
So,
But
so you were making a point. And I want to ask a question after you make your point. Your point was that we could talk about the disturbing stuff at the end of the movie, and that's when you froze. So, what were you going to say?
oh no, I was just gonna say, like, do we want to get more detailed with the disgusting like specifics of what happens towards the end? I know we've given a spoiler warning, but if we want to get into that, then let's do it. But if not, I think we could, kind of leave that to the imagination of the viewer.
Yeah, I think that I think we don't have to go into detail about what happens, the gross stuff, right? But I do have a question I want to pose to you.
Yeah.
Do you think that Robbie Banfitch, do you think that he knows what happens to these 4 characters?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think again, okay, so I'm gonna get into a spoiler a little bit without discussing the super gory details. There I mentioned before, there is a scene where he's focused off in the distance on this beautiful mountain, and he tries to get the image more clear, and he sees this random figure, blurry but very clearly wearing red. There's also a scene where the 4 of them together are walking, with the 2 girls are holding umbrellas to block the sun as they're walking across the Mojave to whatever their location is to do this shoot.
Right.
Towards the end of the movie, it becomes at least a little obvious, and I'm saying a little obvious. I admitted I went back and restarted the movie to confirm these things. I also read up on Wikipedia, so maybe it wasn't obvious. Maybe I'm cheating. But it seems as if there is a time splitting, kind of time warping element to this.
Okay.
Where especially that first time they leave the tent in the middle of the night, you see like this kind of glimmer on the screen, and then the character with the axe, you get a bit of a close-up of him later on, and it kind of looks similar to Robbie. Maybe it's Robbie fighting a version of himself. Again, not going to spoil the graphic details, but at the end, Robbie is bleeding a lot and walking alone in the desert, and it seems as if the guy off in the distance in the red was himself, and that he saw a version of himself. And he also, while he's walking by himself, finds he looks out and he sees a group of people walking across the desert, and he's screaming for help, and it's very obvious upon rewatch that it's the 4 of them.
Yeah.
The 2 girls holding the umbrellas give it away that, he's seeing a version of himself and the 3 other characters walking across the desert.
Yeah.
There's also the sign, at the end, where he looks down and there is a gas mask and a sign that appears to be a restricted area warning sign.
Right.
And, I know one of your favorite movies of all time, horror movies especially, is Alexander Aja's The Hills Have Eyes.
It is.
So that's instantaneously, I thought of that, and I thought of actually, bizarrely, Creepshow 2, The Raft,
right.
Where at the very end of the raft, the camera pulls back and it says, like, absolutely no swimming.
Yeah.
And again, not exposition, but it does kind of give away that where they were walking is a place that they absolutely should not have been.
Yeah.
And that maybe there's some government testing going on, that is leading to these kind of crazy phenomena that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Again, I love the fact that we're having this conversation and we're not sure. And
Yeah.
like, we're asking, do you think the director even knows? And I'm like, I think he does, but he might not. He might have just left an ambiguous, he might have this crazy ambiguous movie that is up to us to interpret. And, I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I really like the movie. I was really struck by like the beauty and and a lot of the stuff that I saw in the first hour. Yeah. And then I was like blown away by some of the gore. Again, this movie doesn't feel like it was a big budget movie. Like, there are creatures that kind of look like they're worm, like it kind of looks like a fairly cheap effect. It does kind of feel a little like Lovecraftian, but then there's gore that feels like it was like Evil Dead 2. Like, all right, let's throw some more guts and some more like Peter Jackson in the early 90s kind of stuff. So we were talking last night, and this movie has been compared to another movie very similar that just came out. Right. It's been compared to Skinamarink.
Skinamarink, yeah.
And I said to you last night, I think the only reason that these movies are compared to each other is because they are fairly avant-garde, borderline experimental horror films that happen to come out about a month apart in limited theatrical release and then released straight to streaming. Skinamarink is on Shudder. This movie is on Screenbox.
Right.
Which, if nothing else, is a message to the viewers that you should get both streaming services.
Yes. Yeah.
This movie's nothing like Skinamarink.
Yeah.
It's not at all. Skinamarink is insanely isolated inside of a dark house. The camera does not move a lot. It focuses on things for long periods of time. There's long periods of time where you just hear sounds and nothing is happening on screen. And I know that a lot of people have said that they love it and that I respect the hell out of it, but it just wasn't for me.
Sure.
I've been a found footage fan for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
I saw Blair Witch in theaters in 1999.
Right.
I think found footage movies and handheld and docu-style movies have the ability to scare you the way that narrative, like normal style narrative film, doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think this is much more in that Blair Witch Project realm than it is in the realm of Skinamarink. I think it's really a timing issue that these two movies get compared to each other.
Yeah. I haven't seen Skinamarink, so I can't say either way. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying about like the creature effects and the budget too, because there are those worms, which I think those are kind of scary. They did look kind of low budget. Kind of reminded me of Tremors a little bit too. But the once again, like the sound and stuff, because they scream, they make a screaming noise, and they just zip past you.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of if you run into some kind of weird creature in the wilderness, it could be very jarring like that. And you're like, what the hell are they about? And there is one sequence towards the end where they are kind of like wrapped around a person. And that I thought that was very disturbing to watch.
Yeah, then, that creature, whatever that creature almost reminded me of like The Thing. Because like you get a much, like at first all you see are these like worm-like tentacles like zooming across the screen with this like screech. And then towards the end in the tent, suddenly there's like tentacles everywhere and you get a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
Like, albeit not on the screen for very long, but you get a much bigger picture of like whatever this monster or creature is.
Right.
And yeah, I started to think about, The Thing and monsters like that. Like I did. You mentioned Tremors. Whenever you're in the desert and there's worm-like things looking like they're coming out of the ground, there's also just these bizarre scenes. Like you mentioned the scene where they put the camera speaker in
The Rock.
the rock, and then there's just these scenes of like blood, where it looks like the blood is kind of oozing out of the earth. And there are these two scenes early in the film of earthquakes that look legitimate. Like, I don't know if that's real or not, but it looks friggin' legit.
Right.
Where, like, oh shit, we were filming and an earthquake hit.
Yeah.
And it made me think again that, like, okay, maybe this is something where there's this like Lovecraftian older god coming out of the earth, rising up, and the blood coming out of the earth, and it's driving everyone insane. Everyone's just in the desert going insane, trying to deal with these old world creatures. Again, if I asked Robbie Van Fitch this, he might look at me and go, yeah, dude, you were smoking something different that night. That's not at all what I was going for. But the fact that I'm thinking about that, again, makes me really appreciate this movie. I like when movies are... It's weird. There's times where a movie is left open to interpretation where I kind of feel like it's like a slap in the face. Like, like you don't deserve an explanation.
Yeah.
And then there's movies like this where I feel like this is why I watched this movie. Like, I wanted to watch this movie I didn't want this movie explained to me in like a card at the end that was like, the four of them were found and there were drug paraphernalia. No, I don't want to know that. Like, I want to know, I just want to like wonder what the fuck was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And, because for a while there, you sort of go along with this found footage conceit for a while, where you're like, okay, this literally is stuff that they found on memory cards in the desert, and it makes sense. But then you get to this point where Robbie is looking at his brother, and his brother's covered in blood, but his brother is inside of an airplane, and then Robbie would be on the outside of an airplane.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, all right, so now we're like in another world. Like, this isn't, the rules don't really apply here.
And then his mother is randomly in the desert for like a scene.
Right, and like a chandelier or something from like her house is there too. It's really weird, and so that kind of gives more credence to the idea of like it's somehow like his perspective or his mind. But I wanted to go back. I like your theory that you said about like almost like a Cthulhu or like an elder god kind of thing under the earth. But I think that if we are going with the idea of like government testing, instead of it being like that a creature was awakened, it's either I think that like there's some kind of radiation and it's messing with humans, and that's what happens to like Robbie, or it's some kind of like time travel thing where like physics are all fucked up. Because like you said, he kind of sees himself, films himself, when they're early on in the desert, and then it just kind of jumps around for him. And it makes sense with the radiation and stuff, because one of the times when blood is on the ground is after it seems like he threw it up himself, So I feel like he's definitely going through some kind of metamorphosis. Like, he has the skin he pulls off of him, and he's throwing up blood and stuff. And then I think that there's also this time paradox too. Like a couple weeks ago, I can't remember what the fuck we were talking about. Maybe The Witching Hour or something. But you were talking about Lost. And I was kind of getting like a Lost vibe from that too. What
was the show we were watching that was based on the book series? It wasn't the Mayfair Witches. It was the one. It was what we did it for Comic Books Transformed.
The Peripheral.
The Peripheral. Maybe it was something like that, where you have like characters that are, basically time jumping and jumping into robots in the future. And
that's the beauty of this movie. Like you just said, it's like it's ambiguous, and that makes it more realistic. And it being more realistic makes it scarier, because it makes you, like you said before, it makes you kind of be in the shoes of the main character, and you're like, oh my god, could you imagine experiencing this? This is a fucking nightmare. Like, it's a nightmare experience, this movie, and it ends in such a bleak way too. I mean, I think we're not spoiling it, but it's not like, oh, okay, well, the nightmare's over and this is good. No, it's like, oh, this is pretty much like the worst it could be by the
Yeah.
very end, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I I know where you're still you're about to get up the last that video that we did, the top 5.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah, our top 5 of last year is about to go up probably by the end of this week. I know it's already March, but hey, we do this all the time. We always need a few months of catch up time to make sure we see all the movies we missed. But the reason I bring that up, aside from the fact that you guys should like watch that when it premieres, is I just have a strong feeling that this is going to be on my top 10 of this year. If not for the fact that it's the highest quality film that I'm going to watch, then for the fact that it's making me think so much, and it's filling me with like all of these crazy ideas that I'd love to see more developed. And like it's weird to say that this is a movie I'd like to rewatch, and I really hope at some point this movie gets a wider theatrical release and I'm able to go see it in theaters, because I would love to see this on a big screen with like, the highest possible volume of sound, and just kind of immerse myself in that darkness.
Shit, yeah. It's for some reason it's kind of making me think about that movie Seder that we covered too. Like, because that's another movie where there's a lot of like weird imagery and stuff, and then there is found footage in it too.
Yeah.
But like I like this kind of genre, of like, what the fuck am I even looking at? It's sort of more of an experience. I'd rank it pretty high for me as far as like, this is the type of horror movie I think I like the best, besides maybe just like straight up bleak, really good stories too.
Yeah.
It meant like folk horror stuff too. So I was gonna ask you, Robbie Banfitch, have you seen anything else by him, or is this like his first main?
I looked at IMDb very, very quickly. I was kind of just looking for like the trivia on this movie after it was done. I don't think that he's done anything that has been like wide released. But kind of like the director of Skinamarink, it's the type of movie where even though I didn't love Skinamarink, I will definitely go see the next project that guy works on, because if he could do that with $15,000, not 1.5 million, not 15 million, $15,000, then I would love to see what he's going to do with a bigger budget. I would love to see what Robbie Banfitch can do with a bigger budget. I'd love to see, more like psychedelic body horror, Lovecraftian insanity. I'd love to see more of that,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. How do you top it? It's a fucking experience, that's for sure. So people that are new to our channel or want to know what's coming up on our channel, what can they experience on the Lastercast coming up?
Excuse me.
Some coffee.
Well, I've been doing a bunch of shorts. I've been trying to catch up on some horror movies that from around the world, and that have been going to streaming and VOD and theaters. You can watch my review, 30-second to about less than a minute review of Cocaine Bear. You can watch my 45-second review of this crazy South Korean action horror movie called Project Wolf Hunting. I've been doing a bunch of those. I'm going to probably do another one when I get home tonight, because I'm heading to Alamo Drafthouse for the 9:30 showing tonight of Jodorowsky's Santa Sangre.
Oh my
this
God.
is going to be my first ever Jodorowsky movie.
Yeah.
It's going to be the first time I ever see Santa Sangre. I've heard incredible things. It's playing at Alamo. I couldn't pass it up. And you live, in Austin or outside of Austin where Alamo was born.
Right.
And I don't know about your Alamos down there, but near us, they do these like Tuesday night terror nights.
Yeah.
And they do like Wednesday, like wacky, weird Wednesday movies.
Yeah.
So this is a weird Wednesday movie. Every Tuesday they do horror movies. My buddy and I, from Horror Trivia, we go to between Alamo Drafthouse and Nighthawk Cinema. We go to a ton of these old horror movies. We actually just got tickets to see Vigilante, which is and William Lustig, the director, is going to be there for a Q&A.
Oh, that's cool.
William Lustig also directed Maniac Cop and Maniac. The original Maniac, like a real grindhouse 80s filmmaker. He's going to be there. That's in late March. So like I have tickets to a ton of crazy movies that I've never seen before coming up. I'm really excited. As far as what else is on our channel, I don't know. It's a new month. We're Shudder's releasing some new stuff. And yeah, we're going to figure out, but we have our best of the top 5 of 2022 coming out this week. I'm sure you have a bunch of horror author interviews in the can that will be going up over the next couple of days and weeks.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm open to any ideas.
Yeah, you guys can always tell us if there's something you want us to cover. But that Santa Sangre movie that you mentioned, that's on In Search of Darkness 3, right?
Yeah, they do talk about that. Speaking of In Search of Darkness 3, my delivery is, I got a tracking message that it's on the way. And so it wasn't here today. I'm hoping it'll be here tomorrow.
Nice.
Maybe I'll do like an unboxing video of like what's inside, because I think I got like the package that has the posters and the pins. And so we'll see what happens when I get home from work tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I'm really looking forward to getting my hard copy of it. And yeah, I'm just I'm about an hour and a half into Woodlands Dark on Shudder, which is the 3.5 hour folk horror documentary, which you will fucking love because it's right up your alley.
Yeah.
Fuck, and there's a bunch of movies in that I am like, I have to check out.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited. Yeah. I know you, not only do you love folk horror, but you love The Wicker Man, and they talk about the unholy 3 right at the beginning. And the unholy 3 of folk horror are Witchfinder General with Vincent Price, The Blood on Satan's Claw, and then of course The Wicker Man. So it's one of like the focal points of this 3-hour documentary is The Wicker Man. Maybe we could do a review of the original Wicker Man.
Oh man, that'd be.
It would suck if I had to rewatch that great movie.
Nice, yeah. Oh man, okay. Well, I wanted to say about In Search of Darkness. We've also been covering movies from In Search of Darkness. Yes. We covered Possession, and then we also covered Puppet Master. So we're gonna eventually cover more movies on that documentary.
Oh
as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, we are. Yeah. I've also gone down the Puppet Master rabbit hole. Thanks to Shudder and then Tubi. I just finished. I'm up to Retro Puppet Master, which is Puppet Master Part 7.
Oh my God.
The good thing is by the time they get to this, they're only about an hour and 10 to an hour and 15 minutes. And that includes about 5 minutes of opening and beginning credits. So they're basically hour-long movies at this point.
Oh my God.
And they're kind of insane, but I kind of have this sick fascination with them at this point.
Yeah.
So if we ever wanted to do a 15 film Puppet Master franchise ranking, I could probably do that in about another month or so.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's we'll see. We got a lot on our plates.
There's literally like nobody asking for that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, as you guys can see, we put out a lot of content. Danny puts out multiple videos a week, but we always put out at least one video together per week too. So if you like hearing me and Danny talk about horror movies, make sure that you subscribe to the Lastercast. Make sure you give this video a like, and we will see you guys